We would like to call to order this meeting of the Provo Municipal Council. Today is Tuesday, August 24th, 2021. The time is 5:55 p.m. Meetings of the Municipal Council are now being held in hybrid fashion. That is, members of the public can continue to view council meetings on YouTube and Facebook, or they may attend in person in the council chamber at the Provo City Center. However, because coronavirus infection rates have risen to high levels again, some council members, staff, and presenters are opting to participate via Zoom. The coronavirus pandemic is not yet over. The Delta variant of COVID-19 and infection transmission rates are again high, particularly among unvaccinated persons. We encourage everyone who is eligible to get vaccinated. We encourage all people to protect themselves and others by following the protocols set by the CDC and our state and local health departments. Please stay safe and be kind. This meeting is being broadcast live on the web on the Provo City Council YouTube channel, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. I remind participants to mute your microphone when not speaking so as to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. We have present all counselors either in person or remotely, except for Counselor Hanley, who is excused. And has Counselor Hoban joined us? Apparently he's excused, at least for the moment as well. We also have Mayor Kafusi and members of the administration and council staff here with us as well. The opening prayer was going to be offered by Counselor Hoban, but he's not here, so Counselor Ellsworth. Yes.
Our dear kind Father in heaven, we're grateful for this wonderful city that we live in and all the people who work so hard to make it clean and safe and beautiful. We're grateful for those who work every day to keep Provo safe and to protect us from natural disasters, from fire, from crime. Father in heaven, we pray that thou will bless each person here tonight, that we can each understand the issues that are being presented, that we can make the best possible decisions. Help us to be compassionate neighbors and help us to make Provo a more welcoming place to live. We say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. The Pledge of Allegiance will now be provided by Counselor David Harding.
Will the audience please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Our first item of business tonight is a presentation from the mayor and the city council to Karl and Glee Zumbrennen in appreciation for their work and service in changing Provo's form of government to what it is today, and also for presenting a written history of those events to the council and to the mayor. I'd like to, let me just make a couple of comments and then I'll turn it over to the mayor. Seeing as how these two gentlemen were instrumental in and put in a lot of work to get us to the point where we have the form of government that we have now, where we have a separation of powers between the executive and the legislative branch. We thought it fitting that both the council and the mayor should be involved in this presentation tonight, and that's why we've chosen to do it that way. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you, Chair Sewell. I wanted to just echo Chair Sewell's words. As we study our government, it's unique because it used to be a three-commission government. People often say, Mayor, what is the government? They always clump me in with all the other Utah County mayors, and we're not. We're different. We are a strong mayor form of government, and it is very effective, and we have had great success with this form of government. But it isn't anything I did, and it isn't anything Chair Sewell did. It's everything that Karl Snow did. And so, Karl, if you would join us up here, please. And Glee Zumbrennen, and come on up, Glee. These are the two gentlemen that really went to work to make this change happen. The beauty of it is I grew up with these two gentlemen and their families. They have wonderful children. I have 7 siblings and they have a lot of kids, and I think there's one of mine for every one of theirs in between. Yeah, it's really fun. So I thought, and Chair Sewell and I, we meet every month, and we thought this is a great opportunity to recognize you for your hard work and dedicated service. As a public servant, we know that it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. It's on all the time, right, Senator Snow? You remember those days probably.
I do.
Yes. And also wanted to recognize Pat and Donna, your spouses, because as I've learned with my husband, I couldn't do the work I do without the full support of my husband, who also is here supporting me tonight. So we know who really is behind us, buoying us up and lifting us up. With that said, why don't we go ahead, and Karl, would you like to take a few minutes, and then we'll let Glee talk about maybe just a few minutes of how you played the citizen engagement role?
Okay.
You have to be careful when you get a professor here who's programmed for 50 minutes. Let me make it 3. I grew up in Provo under the commission form of government. I went to college studying about local government and was convinced that commission form of government was small, steady stuff and passé. Nonetheless, Provo City continued in commission form of government until 1981. Is that correct? 1981, I believe, was the year that it was finally adopted. Legislation was passed in 1911 mandating commission form of government for every major city in Utah, which lasted for over 60 years or more. And so Provo City operated under that form of government until legislation was passed omitting that provision that mandated commission form of government and offering optional forms of local government. Now, I had a neighbor who consistently asked me, when is Provo going to change its form of government? Weldon Taylor, dean of the business school. I turned to Weldon and said, Weldon, us BYU people aren't going to do it. You got to find someone from Provo City Chamber. And so what did we find? A neighbor up the street, Glee Zumbrennen, a member of the chamber, who took on the cause and led the fight to change Provo City's government. And I thank Glee for his efforts.
Thank you, Karl. Well, it was a new experience for me to be involved in something about this changing government. I grew up in Provo also, and I thought the commission form was just the way it was. And Karl said, no, there's a better way. So I was involved in the Chamber of Commerce, and we got together and got a committee. I think there were about 12 of us. And we started meeting to learn about the optional forms of government. And we found out that the commission form had many problems with it. And management of the city was up to the voters to select a manager. And we didn't think that the voters could always choose a good manager. So we had 3 different commissioners, and we learned a lot about the options and how the commission form came about in Provo. And so we decided that this form of government, the mayor council with a mandated chief administrative officer, would serve Provo the very best. And so we set about having an election, and we had many people involved. And as it turned out, we we prevailed and Provo elected to choose this form of government. And I think that from what I can see, Provo has been served well. Provo is a growing community, and it's ever increasing its challenges to provide the services that Provo City people demand. So it's been pleasant to see our work transpire and see the results. And so that's one thing in my life that I feel proud about, is being involved in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Glee.
Got some plaques I would like to present you with.
Thank you.
Yes, so
Oh, my.
there you go, Karl.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor.
You are going down in history. And Glee Zumbrennen didn't mention he is the brick oven, and so we owe him many thanks in many ways for bringing brick oven to Provo.
Thank you.
Dollars I'd like to give you. Like I said, we can't do these public servant jobs without our spouses. Full support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
This is awesome, right?
It's fun.
Fun to read history.
I didn't expect this.
Might we suggest a photo with the gentlemen and their plaques and their spouses?
Okay, counselors who are here, let's join in with that.
Let's move you over here because that's a big glare. Congratulations.
Thanks, Wayne. Right. Right. Well, that was very well done.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. Counselors, we do have a few other items of business tonight.
There's a Hannah left her dinner there.
Oh,
I don't know if she's coming back for it.
oh, okay.
So if she has left tonight,
Put it in the fridge
I
and we'll
can put it in
see.
the fridge or
Yeah.
maybe I'll just put it in the fridge right now.
Yeah, and then I can direct her.
Aaron,
there.
I think you have a hot mic. All right, next item of business is approval of minutes for the July 6th, 2021 council meeting. Are there any objections or requested changes to those minutes? Seeing none, I will declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. And we'll now turn to the public comment portion of the meeting. Do you normally do that, Mr. Strachan?
Be happy to.
Okay.
I will say too, that it's really nice to see public in the room.
Yes, it is.
Thanks for being here.
I haven't seen that much lately.
As indicated on the screen, required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each such item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for all those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, public comment will still be taken following presentation of the item, but will be limited to 10 minutes. At this time, up to 15 minutes have been set aside for open public comment, which is intended to allow comment on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Persons who speak during this time to an item that is on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during the comment period specific to that item. During any public comment period, each speaker will be generally limited to 2 minutes. Due to noticing requirements, no formal action will be taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Those with comments are invited to approach the podium. Those participating on Zoom will need to use the raise hand feature to indicate that they wish to comment. Please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence. You will have 2 minutes to speak. Public comment period starts now.
And Mr. Tanner, I just wanted to remind you also, normally this particular public comment period is for matters that are
Stuff.
general stuff that's not on the agenda.
Yes,
Okay, good.
I'm going to do that.
Excellent.
First time I ever spoke in public, I was 4 years old and I was granted 2.5 minutes. And many of you probably had the same experience. I was scared to death. I would just like to implore the council to reconsider the 2-minute thing. I know it's been going on for a long, long time. It is a little bit demeaning to be given 2 minutes as an adult when I was given 2.5 as a 4-year-old. So I would ask that this city council at some point, whenever there's nothing else going on in the city, to consider maybe 2.5 or 3 minutes for public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the record, that was Wayne Tanner, and he resides in Provo. Anyone else like to make a public comment? Seeing none online either, we will
There's
close.
only one person online in the attendees list, and his hand is not raised.
It's not up. Okay. We'll close public comment then and move on to our next action agenda item, which is an ordinance amending titles 14 and 15 of the Provo City Code to remove gendered references and to make stylistic and grammatical corrections. And this item is to be presented by Melissa McNally, planner.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, council, Mr. Parker and Mayor. So this item, this ordinance text amendment is to fix several things in the code. It's kind of a cleanup. And you probably noticed in your packet, it's pretty hefty. It's a lot of pages of things. So I just wanted to go over some of the items that are included in this cleanup. We go to the next slide. Okay. So one of the first items is the definitions of household pets and emotional support animals. We've removed and put into Chapter 8, which is the animal control. We felt like it was more appropriate to be addressed there. So any reference to those things in our sections of code in 14 and 15 will just refer to Chapter 8. Next is the general neutral language, which was changed in 14 and 15. One of the other corrections we did was floodplain is listed in 2 words and it should be combined into 1 word. We've also included the standard land use code for religious activities, which legally should be permitted to be used in all zones. So we have included that as a permitted use in all of the zones and removed it as a conditional use. And we went and made a clearer definitions of accessory buildings to include within a building, within a buildable area and outside of a buildable area. And then just some language to clarify height requirements. And then there's also, will you go to the next slide, please? There's also a section of code that was erroneously omitted when things were submitted for the new FC3 zone. So we've just added that to be included with the FC3 zone where it should be. And okay, if you want to go to the next slide. So this is just showing the definitions that were added to Chapter 8 of the household pets, if you want to review that. And we go to the next slide. And then service animals, and we reference the federal code for some of these definitions to make sure that we're in line with ADA requirements and such. So next slide. So for the accessory buildings, what you see before you now is what was previously there. Do you need a minute to read that, or we'll just go to the next? Okay. If I'm going too fast, let me know. And then the changes that were made just to make that more clearly defined when an accessory building is within a buildable area. And then the next slide, when it's outside of the buildable area on the same lot. So do you want to go to the next slide? Or is that it? That's it? Okay. Okay. Do you have any questions? I know this is a lot. This is really big. Do you have any questions for me at this time?
Does this in any way impact our accessory dwelling units, or is this separate from that?
It's separate from that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Not seeing any.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll now open this item for a public hearing. If there's anyone that would wish to comment on this item.
Mr. Chair, Dave Horn from Provo City wants to talk from the Zoom meeting.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Mr. Horn.
Well, David Horn from Provo City. I have two items of question about these changes. Number one, the general gender neutral language change. My basic question here is why? The second one on the accessory building, maintain the same appearance as the main dwelling, appears to be provide prohibition against accessory buildings of sheds and other things that do not conform to the main dwelling. So I think that is a section that is an overreach of the requirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. Can we get a clarification on that second question? Was there a substantive change in that section?
Robert Mills, there's no substantive change to that. That's a common practice in our code that asks that accessory buildings be similar in architectural detail to the existing dwelling. But we don't have any specific requirements on exactly looking like the dwelling. It's just encouraged to be similar in architectural style.
All right, and that was the same before this change, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harding.
If I may ask a follow-up on that. I mean, I guess just in reading this, I would have considered that a substantive change that and maybe I missed it. So help me understand, but I didn't think that was a requirement before, or at least not in the code. And I'm scrolling and I can't find it right now, but it seemed like it wasn't there before, and now it is there. So is that not being taken out? In our residential design standards, that's an encouraged part of our code that exists already. So it does already exist. We already have standards saying that accessory buildings should match the architectural style of the main building. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just to follow up on that, my understanding is then that this is not a substantive change. And the question of whether or not it should be the way that it is would be a question for a different day than today. If that made sense. Mr. Harding, you look like you have a question on your face.
Yeah, so it's definitely something that you can absolutely consider today if that's something that's important to you. But as you're thinking about these changes to the code, the intention was that they wouldn't be far-reaching. They wouldn't be, extreme changes to the way that we have dealt. It's more like the gender question. We're just removing language that says like the director is a he and things like that. So the intent of this this ordinance text amendment was just to add clarification, add more modern language rather than a substantive change. But if you have further questions about that, please let us know.
Would it be possible to put the before and after of that up on the screen? I don't have it real clear in my mind what the difference is between.
They're working on that for you.
That's just going to help us.
Yeah.
And while we're waiting, if I may, Chair,
go ahead.
I went into this reading, very curious to see how this would be handled. I think historically, I'm currently trying to learn Spanish, and it's even more gendered than English, and kind of by default, if the gender is unknown, then it defaults to the masculine. And I think English has been that way as well, where things may in the past have referred to he being just for anyone. And so when I read through this, I was a little, that kind of question of why are we doing this? I I was curious to see how it would play out, and I was very pleased we now have it up on the board, but I was very pleased with how it was done. I thought it was done very well, and that it added clarity to the language and removes potentially controversial / problematic language. And so I think after reading through it, I'm happy to support this. None of my concerns that I was worried about played out. So I'm very pleased with how this was done.
Yeah, and I wasn't raising a question about, for example, what's on the screen, changing his to the applicants, but I still wasn't 100% clear on whether the meaning of the ordinance had changed with the, so this doesn't look like the section that Mr. Horn was referring to. Can we get that part up? Okay, so there's no change at all in that part of the code that's being proposed, from what I can see.
I think the blue is addition, so that is new.
Oh, the whole blue section is new? Okay. And Mr. Jones, go ahead.
I was going to piggyback on Mr. Harding's question. So my comment was about the part of the question was about removing gendered language, if you'd like me to wait.
Go ahead, Mr. Jones.
Okay. So I just wanted to, I think Mr. Harding already expressed this to some degree, but some background on this is a few years ago, the Utah State Legislature went through a similar exercise with state code. And then a couple of years ago, by ballot initiative, the voters voted to remove gender reference language from the Utah State Constitution, and that was done. There was some comments made in some meetings a while back, and staff undertook, because of those comments, an effort. And again, just to be clear, we're not talking about removing language that acknowledges that gender exists or any of those kinds of, or references to the idea of gender. What was done is to go through and remove language or alter language that referred only to one gender, specifically to the male in I think probably every case. And that was done, that was undertaken by staff in accordance with the published guidelines by the Utah State Legislature as far as their style guide. And as you may recall, the City Council already voted to do that in the entire city code except for titles 14 and 15. And the reason why it's coming to you separately is because titles 14 and 15 had to go to the Planning Commission before coming to you. So that part of this ordinance is to just finish that process out and do the part of the code that the Planning Commission reviewed so that it has the same stylistic elements as the rest of the code.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm fine with all of that. I think my question here is my understanding was that these changes all had to do with gendered references and stylistic and grammatical corrections, but this change here looks like it's more than that to me. That there's some additional bullet points in there and some additional requirements. So
yeah, I believe that planning staff had a number of what they considered to be stylistic changes only that they tried to incorporate all into one ordinance to come before you one time. I can't speak to this specific one. I'm trying to look right now for where that language might already be somewhere else in the code, but Robert or Melissa may have to answer that question.
And Mr. Mills is working on pulling that up right now.
okay. Yeah, if it's if it's already there in the code, then I don't have a concern about it. If this is something new, then I would prefer to defer it to a separate discussion. So,
Can I ask whoever's controlling the screen to scroll up a little bit more? I want to see the actual similar material language. Okay, there we go.
any other comments or questions while we're waiting for Mr. Mills to look that up? Councilor Ellsworth.
This is just a question, I think, for Mr. Harding. Is your primary concern with the maintain architecturally similar architecture, or is there a concern with other elements of this?
At this point, I don't have a concern.
Okay.
I think we're just, I believe the staff are trying to find the place in the code that it already has these things to address Mr. Councilor Sewell's concern.
Okay.
This isn't the specific reference, but it shows the intent of what the existing code says and has reference to in the design standards. The residential design standards section of our code in 1434 talks at length in there about architecturally compatible structures. And this was just an opportunity to extend that to architecturally compatible accessory structures on a residential lot. And I think that's why we specifically in the language said architecturally similar materials and colors, but doesn't specifically require like the exact same materials. And so it allows staff to be lenient in how that's interpreted, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr.
Chairman.
Yes.
I just did a very quick search of the code, and the same language is in 1450, 070, 1449D, 080, 1432, 080. So it's scattered throughout, same language is scattered throughout the code.
Yeah.
So this would, again, related to accessory buildings. So yeah, I don't think it changes the nature of the discussion, probably clarifies it as it relates to this particular section of code, but that same phrase is found 14 or 15 times elsewhere in Title 14.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. That resolves my question. Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions on, oh wait, let's see, we haven't closed the public hearing. Are there any other members of the public that wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring this back to the council for any further discussion. Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of the passing the implied motion? Councilor Shipley?
Yes.
Councilor Fillmore?
Yes.
Councilor Hoban, are you with us? Okay, so we have Councilors Ellsworth, Sewell, Harding, Shipley, and Fillmore in favor with Councilors Hoban and Hanley excused. Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 4. And Councilor Shipley, would you mind, sorry, I didn't think to ask you this sooner, but would you mind chairing this item? I just have personal connection to just about everybody involved with this, so.
Not a problem. Not a problem. So this action item is an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 1.07 acres of real property located at 50 East, 3900 North, from residential, or R110, to low-density residential, or LDR, and two-family residential, R2, and authorizing a related DA. River Bottoms neighborhood. Is that complete there, that thought there? Anyway, do we have listed who's going to present on this one?
Looks like Mr. Ardmore.
So Mr. Ardmore, thank you.
Thank you. There's kind of a long history with this one, so I'll try to be brief. This rezone request started in March of 2020 with the Planning Commission, and went through a few rounds with the Planning Commission before they recommended approval with a development agreement on October of 2020. The council saw this in November and took issue with the zone request, and saw a altered request in February, where the applicant was directed to work on the issues with the neighborhood, and has been meeting with Councilor Sewell, I believe, and the neighborhood chair, Mr. Rosen, and has come back with a formal request with 2 different zones now, equating to 9 units on the property. If we could go to the site plan. So this is the site plan that's been provided for this presentation, and then it's also an attachment exhibit in the development agreement that's been proffered by the applicant. You've got the west side, which is to the top of the screen, and the low density residential zone. There's 5 units there. And the R2 zone to the south of the screen is the 4 additional units. So 9 units altogether on just over an acre. If we go to the next slide. The applicant has provided these additional renderings from 2 different, from the north and from the east. And those are also exhibits in the development agreement that's been proffered and signed by the applicant. If you have additional questions for me on the request, I'm happy to answer those, but that's all I've prepared.
Thank you, Mr. Ardmore. Any questions from counselors before we turn to public comment? And help me understand if there are people raising their hand, because I can't see the counselors on my screen. So
I'm watching for you.
thanks, Dave. Okay, so if there are no questions for Mr. Ardmore, we'll go ahead and open it now for public comment. Go ahead and raise your hand if you're on the Zoom call, or go ahead and approach the microphone if you've got a comment.
We might want to let the neighborhood chair and the developer speak first if they want to, just a suggestion.
Good point. Is Mr. Rosen or Mr. LaFontaine here?
Both.
Who have we got approaching the microphone?
This is Dave Rosen. I'm the River
Thank you, Dave.
The chair. I live in Provo. And this has come before us before. And from a neighborhood standpoint, we recognize Mr. LaFontaine's desire and his right to bring a development in front of this council and ask for zone changes. That's his right. And as the neighborhood chair, I will support that and stand up that he has that right to do that. There's been lots of neighborhood comments over the time period, and I won't rehash those, and I won't go into those again. I will indicate Mr. LaFontaine has made some effort to reduce the number of units and try to match the subdivision that he is asking to do some infill in. What I would like to take my time, because I listened to the July 20th council meeting where a similar type of property came as an infill property before this council. And there were several questions and several things that were raised at that time as I sat and watched that got me thinking. And one was Commissioner Harding, Councilman Harding. His question is why do these properties go from 1 to 12? Why aren't they somewhat smaller and fit? The other one was Miss Ellsworth, who asked to see a plot of the neighborhood and was concerned at how many multiple families were in that neighborhood. And she voted against it and said there's too many, both number of units on a particular property, but also number of multi-family units that were then going there. That in particular got me thinking. So I wandered around our River Bottoms neighborhood and I took a look. In the River Bottoms, and we are somewhat classified as a fully single-family group neighborhood, which isn't true. We're a very diverse neighborhood. We have commercial. We have a shopping center. We have 10 multifamily units in our neighborhood, totaling 941 units. And this particular property, if we were to look at 3700 North to 4200 North and University to about 3rd East, a 5x3 block area, we have 168 multifamily housing units and 51 single-family homes. How many is too many? That's your decision. You have to make that. You have to decide on that. In addition to that, on the commission, we have another 105 unit that is going to come. It's in the planning commission. And another unit of 125 to 150 townhomes that will be in our neighborhood. How many is too many? I'd leave that to your decision and let you think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosen. Mr. LaFontaine?
Chairman Sewell and council members, Mayor Capuzzi, thanks for your devotion to the city and all the time you put in. I really don't have many comments at all that I haven't already made in the past through this whole process. There is a few multifamily dwellings in our neighborhood, in our area. Not near as many as there are in South and West Provo, but we have some. And I've been, there'll be a comment tonight that kind of speaks to the need for even more, simply because if you look at the age group that actually own houses, that are very fortunate to own houses right now, with how the economy is going and the boom in Utah, there's a lot of people that just can't afford houses, period. And so my opinion would be the more the merrier because of the need. And the other part is this particular property is bumped up right up against University Avenue. You've got a huge complex to the south of us, a huge complex to the north. It's that whole corridor right there that are they're high, very high density, I believe. So I've tried to put it, so I'm never gonna please the neighbors. It's just not gonna happen. But I've gone through quite a few renditions of this. We're all the way down to actually 6 units, because the triplex that's there on the northwest portion is where my house sits now. And there was no way I wanted to fight the neighbors again and go through this again. So when I met with Councilman Sewell and Pepperoni.
Bill Pepperoni.
Bill. You know, it was like, can we just do this once and for all? Because I don't plan on tearing down my house. But if I ever need to, or would like to, then I want to be able to put something there, and that's where the triplex came from. So that's all I have to say. I thank you for your time in considering this particular property.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant while we, Ollie's close, from any of the council? Okay, other public comment? Cliff, do we have anybody online that would like to make a comment?
We do not. Oh, we do now. Dave Horn again.
Okay, Mr. Horn.
This is Wayne Tanner.
My name is Wayne Tanner. I live in the neighborhood. Couple of things that you need to understand that are not represented here. First of all, straight across the street, Perry Homes came into this council years ago and asked to develop their project in there of twin homes. And they were told that that strip absolutely had to be R110, and that's what's there. And now all across the street on the north of this subdivision, there are 6 or 7 lots, 5 or 6 lots, whatever. All of them $750,000, $800,000, $900,000 homes right across the street. And this council insisted on R1. We've been here at least 4 or 5 times. I've grown accustomed to this room. I'm going to feel personally offended when they tear it down. I want a piece of the paneling. I've been here for 40 years arguing about this neighborhood. And I side with Dave Rosen. How many is enough? I was grateful. I was really grateful that the commission welcomed back the public, because I really truly believe with all my heart that the public has not been represented in this. There are 80 neighbors that are directly affected by this, with property values and traffic patterns and honestly, just too freaking much on 1 acre. One guy gets to sell his property and develop it into 9 units at the expense of 70 neighbors who oppose it. Mr. Harding talked about democracy in this thing. We are a democracy, government by the people. You represent us. We say no, and we've said it adamantly time and time and time and time again, and yet here we are. I believe because of COVID, we haven't packed this room like it would have been. I'd like to bet you that 941 units, a few more isn't going to change Provo City's outcome here. 941 in our neighborhood already there. This is not affordable housing. Entry level on one of these things is going to be $500,000 to $650,000. I am in the real estate business. That's what I do. These will not sell for a penny less than $500,000. Don't even think for a second that this is affordable housing that answers all the needs of the citizenry of Provo.
Thank you.
I implore you to vote against this project and leave at least 1 or 2 neighborhoods in this city R1. That's what we bought. That's what made Provo great.
Thank you.
And we don't want to change it.
Thank you. Mr. Horn.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this situation. In the last meeting that this was reviewed, I believe, I was unable to find the minutes online, apologize, but I believe that the direction that, as read in summary by the minutes, was for Mr. LaFontaine to go and meet with the neighborhood. I do not believe that occurred. As mentioned, I believe he met with David Sewell, representative of the council, even though he was a member of the neighborhood, and Dave Rosen. Mr. LaFontaine stopped by my house for another purpose and reason, and I gave him some ideas. And but what I see in this drawing is an appearance of trying to meet, as Mr. LaFontaine said. He's not going to please everybody, and so this is a catering to try to please some and not others, because we would like to see single family homes, and if they're smaller, that would be great. If they're all single family homes, that would be awesome. Because the requirement was also to present a development plan to be approved and adhered to, and that's the purpose of a development plan. What we see is what we get, and so this triplex just opens it up, and I would rather see the smaller single family units. I would rather see the city keep to what they had recommended as a VLDR instead of splitting it up into 2 different zonings, which is brand new. It's a brand new option. Hasn't been considered, and literally we've had 1 or 2 days notice about looking at this. So sorry that this keeps coming back and going on, but this is appears to be a council with the development applicant with no cooperation with the neighborhood or inclusion by the neighborhood and the members who live in this particular dwelling in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like Mr. Steed.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Mark Steed. I live in the neighborhood, and I have been following with interest the development of Mr. LaFontaine's property over the past few years since we've lived here. And while I am excited for him to realize the development of his property and to reap the remuneration that comes from that, I'm a little exasperated by the process that finds us here today. I slept peacefully after our last discussion of this topic, in which the council seemed to advocate for a VLDR zoning for this property. Mr. LaFontaine came back with a proposal that technically met the letter of the law, but did not meet the essence of the law, and that proved for an interesting discussion. I need you to know I am not opposed to Mr. LaFontaine developing this, but I can't help but agree with Mr. Tanner and Mr. Horn and with others who can't be here for whatever reason. I can't be here because of COVID. But I think that you would find widespread support for a consideration of a reasonable plan that would fit well with the discussion of the VLDR zone, and that would, or one that would continue the R110 designation in the neighborhood. It's a non sequitur to say that just because it's a twin home means it's affordable. We see this is not the case as we look at properties throughout Provo. It's a facade. It's not real. More does not mean cheaper or less expensive. And we bought this property. We love this neighborhood because of what it is. And we think that backfilling it with an excess of low density residential properties undermines the tenor and tone of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steed. Other comments there in the council chambers?
One more.
Please state your name and the city of residence.
Kira Christensen from Provo. I actually just wanted to read something really quick that I was reading in an article regarding the housing crisis in Utah. It's Robert Vernon, the CEO of the Provo City Housing Authority, and he stated there's a big disconnect between the generation that's enacting housing legislation and the generation that's actually buying the housing. The folks who are most impacted by the shortage will have to weigh in, because as long as we have a debate between one generation's perception of what's desirable and what the generation entering the market actually wants, it will never work. So I'm here. I've been to some of these meetings before, and I honestly haven't commented before. And I don't think anyone really that is a millennial has commented in these meetings. For my personal situation, I've been going on and on about the housing crisis in Utah, and I haven't done anything about it. And so that's why I'm here. We need more housing, honestly. People my age, that's the number one discussion we have right now, is there's nowhere to buy a house. We love Provo. It's where we grew up. It's where we want to stay. We went to college here. It's where we want to work, but we're being pushed out. And it's kind of been disheartening to see that this development and many other developments have been pushed back for the cause of accommodating for the older generation. And obviously we want to accommodate for everyone, but these people are living in secure homes already. They are already established, and we are people that are having to put off our lives genuinely because we can't set roots down. So honestly, if I were to say anything about this, I think they should be able to develop more. If you look at the housing quarters all along University Avenue, there's 3-story apartment buildings. And I mean, it's been discussed in meetings before that there are neighborhoods where they have been able to accommodate for large housing as well as condos and apartments. So that's just my 2 cents as a millennial, because I know we don't generally get out to these things. Just that I think that the neighborhood could benefit from this, and that this is a step towards defeating the housing crisis, really. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Do we have any other comments online, Cliff?
We do not.
Okay. Seeing no further comments, we'll go ahead. Mr. Sewell, public comment?
Oh, I thought you were bringing it back to the council for discussion. I was just getting my hand up.
You were getting ready. Sorry. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and close the public comment at this time and go ahead and bring it back to the council. Mr. Sewell.
Thank you. I just want to say, first of all, that every single person that has spoken tonight about this issue is someone that I know and love. So let me just get that out there. I think 7.5 years ago, before I started serving on the council, I noticed, well, two things I want to say about that. First of all, I think what got me interested in even considering it was that we are passionate about what goes on next door to us. I've noticed that. And that can lead to difficult situations and tensions at times, sometimes even between good friends. And so that's been difficult from that perspective. I think 7.5 years ago or 8 years ago, I probably would have sided with many of the neighbors who would really like to see this remain single family throughout. But I've come to understand more about the housing needs in the city and to understand the difference. When a property is situated next to a major arterial road like this one is, I think my preference would have been to have go with the VLDR zone in general, because I think that's a very good transition into a single family neighborhood. But again, this is a property situated next to University Avenue. So the original proposal for 10 units was turned down. There were some concerns about how well it transitioned into the neighborhood. And we did get a VLDR proposal later, but it concentrated 6 of the units over on the eastern half and left open the possibility that the western half could redevelop LDR down the road with 5 units, which would have brought it up to 11, which would have the potential for being even more than the proposal that was turned down. So I appreciated my council colleagues being willing to give this one more shot to see if we could come up with something that would transition a little better. And I appreciated that Mr. LaFontaine was willing to let me talk with him and with Mr. Rosen and Mr. Pepperoni and see if we could work something out. I think from my perspective as someone who lives in the neighborhood, I think the neighborhood has gained a lot from this proposal, and I'd like to explain what I think is better about this than any of the previous proposals. First of all, we don't have density concentrated on the east side going into the neighborhood. With this proposal, the LDR density is on the western half. And as Mr. LaFontaine explained, that's down the road, who knows how long. For right now, there would just be the twin home in the back and then his nice home there on the northern end. And then someday that'll eventually be potentially replaced with something like this triplex here, which seems like a good fit there. But then as we transition into the neighborhood, we have a little bit lower density. The eastern half is actually very close to VLDR density. We, in our initial discussions, Mr. LaFontaine proffered the idea of 4 single-family homes there on the eastern half, but staff just figured out that wouldn't work with the amount of space that was available. So then we fell back to this idea here with the twin home on the south and the 2 single-family homes with double-car garages and driveways facing the street, the twin home with garages and driveways facing the street. So I think we gained two important things here with this. One is I think it just transitions better into the R110 single family neighborhood, the look and feel of it. Second of all, that street on the bottom there, that 150 East, is a narrow street that only allows parking on one side. So there was a legitimate concern about parking spillover and parking problems there. And the fact that all four of those units on the east have their own driveways should, in my mind, alleviate that concern. So again, I've got friends sitting on both sides of this. As Kira mentioned, I'm sure LaFontaine's would probably like to put more units in, and you can make an argument for that. I'm sure many of my neighbors would prefer that there be fewer units on it. And I just want to say that, in my opinion, this is about the best compromise that I think we could find here. I feel good about it. I intend to support it and vote for it. So.
Thank you, Mr. Sewell. Other comments from councilors?
I have a comment.
Yes, Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, I just want to express my sympathies to the neighborhood. It's definitely uncomfortable when anything changes in our community and something we've invested in, we've been a part of for many years or many decades in some circumstances. To see it change, our expectations aren't met. It definitely creates a discomfort. Unfortunately, or fortunately, that's happening across the Wasatch Front, across the state. Our state's recognized as being the best economy in the country. Our city will continue to attract jobs and consumers, and we'll see a little bit more traffic, and we'll see more homes, and we'll see more kids in our schools. And I hope we can find opportunities to collaborate on that change and on that growth and accept the people who are calling Provo home at this point in their lives who didn't previously. But I am sympathetic to the uncomfortableness that comes with change. Good or bad, it's not going to stop. Our community will continue to grow and continue to change, and hopefully we can all be part of that solution. And hopefully we can all be like Dave Sewell and participate in our community in some way and serve and bring people together.
Thank you, Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Mr. Shipley. There was a question earlier, how many is too many? In that July 6th meeting, we were presented with a proposal for 15 units on 0.8 acres. And an LDR density would call for 9 on 8 acres. And we worked out a compromise and ended up with 12 units on 0.8 acres. This proposal, if I'm getting my numbers right, is calling for 9 units on 1.7 acres. So that's quite a bit less dense than. That's not correct. Quite a bit less dense than what we approved in Mazer. I do have a little bit of a concern where the council was suggesting a VLDR zone, which I believe would allow for 7 units, and this would allow for 9. But at the same time, I did not vote with the majority of the council when we were looking at the VLDR at 7. So I'm okay with this plan. I'm okay with some of the other plans that had been previously presented. So I think I'm prepared to support this as well. There's one thing that I wanted to bring up though. A quote was shared earlier that I think can pit generations against each other, and that intergenerational conflict. And I hope that we as a community can avoid those kind of divisions and those kind of animosities. I think the people I know in Provo across the generations generally care for each other. They care for others. We may have different opinions on what makes the best community, but I think in general, people care about their elders, even if we're younger, and we care about the people that are younger than us if we're older. And I think that's a great thing. And so I just caution against going down the road of pitting groups against each other. I really feel like, and I also call on us to be our best selves and to try to understand the perspective of others. But if we all work together and all have a common goal to do what's best for the community and everyone in it, then I think we will arrive at the best decisions that will keep Provo the special place that it is, even as we can continue our legacy of growth. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Just want to make sure, Mr. Fillmore, do you have a comment that you'd like to make before we call for a vote?
Thank you, David. Truth is, I'm torn both ways. I struggle with the fact that the neighborhood overwhelmingly doesn't want this, but I'm pushed the other way by Mr. Sewell, who's a neighbor right in the middle of it all. I'm pleased that the density has come down from the original request. I'm pleased that it's more weighted to the west side on the main artery. I'm glad to see, that the assumption anyway would be high quality construction with good design standards. But it's obviously a tough call. That's why it's gone through so many iterations.
Thank you. Maybe I'll make a quick comment, and then if any other counselors would like to comment before we vote. I would just like to personally thank Chair Sewell for meeting with the developer and meeting with Bill Pepperoni and Dave Rosen. I think that put him in a difficult spot, and I'm glad and grateful that he saw that through and had those conversations. I had from my notes the last time we talked about this that many of the neighbors were worried about the layout. They were worried about the number of units. They were worried about parking and automobile concerns, about traffic concerns. And I guess as Chair Sewell was talking about the alternatives and something that the Planning Commission had suggested that we approve at that point, staff had suggested that we approve. I feel like this is, some kind of middle ground. And if it's acceptable to those folks who looked at it after, then it's acceptable to me. And I support this. But again, I'm cognizant of the discomfort that Ms. Ellsworth spoke of when it's in your backyard, to have change and to go through transition like this. But again, I think some of what the neighbors that I heard and took notes about from months ago were asking for, I think this tries to accommodate and tries to come to a middle ground. So I'm pleased to see that direction. Any other comments before we come to a vote on this? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All those in favor of the implied motion? Chair Sewell, you're going to have to help me with this because not being there, I can't see the vote from that spot.
Mr. Shipley, I'm going to recommend that you just run through a roll call vote for things.
Okay. Yep.
Thanks.
Not a problem. Mr. Fillmore.
I appreciate the compromises that have been made and the concerns of many of the neighbors that have been addressed. It's a tough call, but I'll vote yes.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mr. Harding?
Yes.
Chair Sewell?
Yes.
Sorry, Chair Sewell.
Yes.
And I, Dave Shipley, will vote yes. So it's unanimous with those here, with Mr. Hanley, excuse me, and let's see, Travis, Mr. Hoban excused. So those two excused, but unanimous for the implied motion, so it passes. I'll go ahead and hand the gavel back to you, Chair Sewell.
Well, thank you. If there's no objection, let's adjourn by unanimous consent. Thank you.